All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again today while we interview Georgia Davenport. Georgia is running for state rep in our eastern part of Washington in Legislative District 7. Georgia, can you tell us a little bit about your district, but what got you to actually step up and run and file for office here in Washington State?
I haven't lived here for very long, so I really didn't expect to run for office so soon, or really ever. I kind of like to operate behind the scenes, and I love initiatives. I worked with Whole Washington and Initiative 735 and that sort of thing. So I didn't really expect to run for office. But Thursday of filing week, no one had filed to run against the incumbent Republican. So she was going to have no opponent, which meant that the $80,000 that she had for her campaign could just automatically be turned over to the Republican state party, and that the voters in this district wouldn't have a choice at all come election day, even just for a protest vote against the sort of tactics that the Republicans are using out here. So that's what basically pushed me over the edge. But also, I would say that even before COVID-19, we've had a healthcare crisis in this country. 522,000 Washington state residents had no health insurance even before millions of people started losing their jobs because of the pandemic. And I've been working on getting universal healthcare for years in this state. And I think that this particular crisis just demonstrates more than ever that healthcare should not be tied to employment. So that's going to be my number one priority when elected to the legislature, is getting the Whole Washington Health Trust out of committee. For the first time, the universal healthcare bill will be out of committee and passed. I know there are several other candidates, great candidates from all over the state who've committed to the same thing, just championing universal health care and ensuring that it actually passes so that everybody can see a doctor when they get sick.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think that's a an amazing reason to run. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that these things come to fruition. So with our revolution and the Berniecrats in general, we really are strong about anti-corruption. And what did you want? Did you say something, Miss Courtney?
I did. I wanted to know a little bit more about, I know she's in the eastern part of the state, but I want to know the parameters of her district.
Yeah, so the 7th legislative district is huge. It takes hours to drive across. There's 5 different counties that it spans, from Okanagan to the very northern tip of Spokane County. I'm in Stevens in a town called 9 Mile Falls. So that's about 10 miles north of Spokane. So it's enormous. I went to go deliver signs 2 days ago, and it took me an hour and a half to get to the place that I was going to deliver signs. So that's so different from the west side, when you can drive across some of these districts in about 15 minutes. But we've got some very interesting, beautiful areas out here. It's a great spot. The only regret I have about moving here is that I didn't do it sooner. It's so amazing out here.
Wow, yeah, because I know a lot of us here on the western parts of Washington were really sad that you were leaving us to the eastern, but we also saw the potential of having you out in eastern Washington would be for the whole state. So thank you for leaving us, I guess.
About rural areas, I think that healthcare really speaks to people who live in this district, because we have so few hospitals, and lots of hospitals are being threatened because private insurance companies have discovered that it's really, really expensive to insure people in rural areas. So we have this thing called Life Flight. I've had to get insurance for Life Flight after moving out here for my family, because it's so far to any hospitals. A lot of hospitals are going out of business due to the private insurance companies pulling out, and only the only thing available here for a lot of people is Medicaid and Medicare. So that's why it's really, really important that we get a universal healthcare system with good reimbursement rates for providers so that we can keep these rural hospitals open.
And the bill that's in legislator, SB 5222, how does that really help those rural communities? How is that going to help shape better healthcare?
Well, a lot of people out here are on Apple Health. So the best way to describe the whole Washington Health Trust is an expansion of Apple Health with better reimbursement rates for providers. So instead of people having maybe just one private insurance option, they would be able to get this Medicaid expansion, which would really, really help not only people get healthcare out here, but the hospitals stay open.
So the reimbursement goes up with this, so it's not that low payout, and that's what's been causing these hospitals and stuff to close, right? And not being able to get a decent payout for the provider, what they provide.
It's because mainly the only options for people out here is Medicare and Medicaid, and if you don't qualify for either of those, then you don't have insurance or you can't afford the insurance option. So with that very low percent of the population being able to go see a doctor because they have insurance, the hospitals can't stay open. So with the whole Washington Health Trust, it creates a provider committee that providers can negotiate directly with the trust for reimbursement rates to help keep rural hospitals open.
Beautiful. Thank you. Courtney, was there anything else on this part before we talk about? Go ahead.
You mentioned anti-corruption, and I want to point out that my opponent has taken thousands and thousands of dollars. If you go look at her PDC filings, it's amazing. And it's like mind-blowing. Some of the corporations she's taking money from, like Phillips 66, charter schools, for-profit insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies. I mean, she is definitely taking money from out-of-state corporations. She's not representing the voters in this district. Since I filed, she's already raised another $10,000, and it's not coming from the grassroots. She'll take, as somebody in my district said to me the other day, she'll take money from anyone. She doesn't care. So and I'm not taking that money, clearly.
Right. Oh, I wasn't going to get away from the anti-corruption. I was making sure Courtney was done with her piece before I went into that deep, because it's
dive in.
We're diving in. So thank you for highlighting that piece, because we do look at PDCs, and a big thing is that we do believe that corporations and this, the oligarchy are controlling our legislators, and we can follow that by watching how they vote. Where do they get their money? Where does their vote go? So it's extremely important. So could you tell us how you plan on fundraising and what kind of funds that you will not absolutely accept? I'm sure that might be easy. I don't know.
Yes, very easy. And so far, it's all been really mostly small donors. I've gotten some donations, larger donations from the 7th LD Democrats, but mostly it's just individuals. And I will not be taking any money from oil companies or pharmaceutical companies. I don't think they would even offer me money, to be honest, because they know I'm not going to be on their side when I get into the legislature. So yeah, I won't be taking their money.
So you're just taking from the people who you would actually be representing. So your votes might actually go the way for the people. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say the people I'm representing, because I don't even know how many times I've emailed my representatives over here and called them, and only one has gotten back to me, and it's not my opponent. But and it was months after the session had ended. So clearly they're not interested in what people in their district have to say or answering any of the questions. And that's one thing I definitely want to change, is making sure I'm accountable to the people in this district. I'm answering their questions and I'm meeting with them and not lobbyists. That's one of the things that I noticed, and I heard a lot when I was lobbying for healthcare, in Olympia is, do you know how strong the for-profit insurance and pharmaceutical lobbies are? I'm like, well, you wouldn't really have to worry about that if you weren't taking their money. You could tell them that you'd rather represent the people in your district than them. If you weren't taking their money, you wouldn't have to sit down with them repeatedly and listen to what their priorities are instead of the priorities of the people in your district.
Ooh, well said. That needs to be cut out and shared everywhere. Totally true. When it so election reform, is another big thing. Anti-corruption, election reform, and even with it, I guess still with the corruption piece, it's even just if anything can look like it could possibly, be questioned, you just got to stay away from, and that's where the establishment just doesn't seem to understand that piece. But a big piece where we're unable to replace some of these incumbents is because of our system, how we have it today. Especially in Washington State, we have this top two. Do you have any thoughts about how we can make that more accessible to people that may not already be in power?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of ranked choice voting. I was recently named, I forget exactly what they called it, for fair vote, like a fair vote star or something. I'm sorry, I can't remember right now, but I worked with Fixed Democracy First on Initiative 735, and I really believe that we need to break away from the current system where we have two choices. Only two choices, Democrat or Republican. We need to expand that. We need to make sure that more people can run for office, don't feel like it's so expensive and inaccessible and really hard to navigate. We need to make sure that that we are lifting people up so that more people's voices can be heard in Olympia and federally.
Oh, so true. Thank you for mentioning that. Could you, just so those that don't know what I-735 was, can you just explain what I-735 was?
Yeah, so more than a decade ago now, I think Citizens United passed, which allowed super PACs to come into existence, which can pour unlimited amount of money from who knows, they're not required to file or report who's donating to them. So from that, the move to amend the Constitution was created. It's called Move to Amend, and you can read all about that. But they are behind HJR 48, which would create a new constitutional amendment stating that money isn't speech and corporations aren't people. So in Washington State, Fixed Democracy First and a few other organizations came together and created Initiative 735, which was the initiative to overturn Citizens United and insist that our legislators get on board with HJR 48 and also create stronger, basically election rules here for more transparency in Washington State.
Yes.
By 64% in 2016. So that was really exciting. And I was the phone bank organizer for that.
Thank you for all that hard work. That was a beautiful initiative for sure. I wanted to open it up to some more questions for people who are in here. I saw Courtney or Oz, do either one of you have something for Georgia? I think it's Courtney. Courtney for the win. She got to the button first.
Okay. I have a question. I know it's outside of your legislative district. However, when one rep goes to Olympia, you make statewide decisions, and you have now even closer proximity to Hanford. So both as an environmental impact and then as a broader nuclear discussion, where are you on that discussion?
Yeah, that's a difficult one.
You're welcome.
I can tell lots of debates on either side, but really, I don't feel comfortable with a nuclear power plant in my backyard, or I wouldn't feel comfortable with a nuclear power plant in my backyard. So I don't really expect other people in other districts around the state to take that upon themselves. So I feel like we need to focus on green energy, renewable energy, solar, wind, and that sort of thing, instead of focusing on that. I will say I'm not an expert by any means on nuclear energy, but again, I really just like, if they said that they were going to build one a mile or 5 miles from my house, I would oppose that with every fiber of my being, just because lots of accidents have happened in the past. They said it was safe in the past as well, and we trusted it, and it turned out to not be safe. So I'd rather have something like a solar panel is not going to blow up and kill hundreds of thousands of people. So I feel like we should really invest in those sorts of technologies, which we know 100% are safe.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Oz looks like he stepped away. Layel or Amelia? Actually, I'm gonna see if Amelia has anything in here.
Yes, Amelia
Layel?
notified us earlier she doesn't have audio, so we're reading hers.
Layel, you there? You have a question for Georgia? You're on mute. There you go.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Georgia.
Hi, how are you? I just sent you a package yesterday.
Oh, awesome. I can't wait. Postcards, yay. I'm ready. So I guess, well, I don't know. Okay, I'll try. Your neighbors and your community has such a big problem with, a mistaken version, no doubt, of socialism. Not that I have any problem with it, but I know that it's a concept that's widely misunderstood. And so how will you counter that for those public members, potential voters? Curious. Thank you.
Thinking about that question a lot since I saw my opponent's Facebook post calling me a socialist. Yeah, it's difficult because I think that there are so many misconceptions about what that word means. And basically, I want to say that everyone here in this district loves the firefighters, right? They go out there, it's a government funded program. They go out there, they fight wildfires, they save our houses. That's a socialist system. It's the government, it's our taxpayer dollars going to a government funded program that saves lives and saves homes, saves property. And without that, many people would end up homeless. So it's interesting that people in my district can, on one hand, really demonize the word socialism, but then they do definitely support socialist programs. So, and it's also interesting. I had a conversation with a Trump supporter a few months ago when I was talking to them about Bernie, and they said, well, I hate Obamacare. And I said, oh, well, how do you see the doctor? Because I knew that, she worked in a field where she wouldn't get health care through an employer. And she said, oh, I have Apple Care. And I said, well, the Apple Care expansion in the state is part of the ACA, which another word for the ACA is Obamacare. And basically Bernie Sanders and myself and a bunch of other people in this state just want to expand Apple Care to everyone. And she said, oh, well, I would totally support that. So it's about framing. It's about a little bit of education. People have heard these words over and over in a negative connotation, socialism, Obamacare, that sort of thing. If you break it down to things that they're familiar with, that they use every day and that they support, they'll realize that maybe the things that they've heard for years, for decades, since 1950 is not exactly accurate. So, but I've been struggling with that very question because I am going to be on a panel, I think Monday, with my opponent, and I'm sure that question will come up. Are you a socialist? And I'm going to have to explain what that means in a very hopefully not super nuanced way, because I know that when you start trying to go into nuance, you lose people. But I would love to hear your ideas of how I can more effectively communicate that word doesn't mean what people think it means.
Yeah, at least, it's being talked about again when it was like hushed and so demonized all over. So I have hope people are opening their minds to that.
Yeah, I mean, my major reaction is, of course, to say that we don't want to return to McCarthyism, clearly. And if you're going to go around calling people socialists and communists, that's what's going to happen, is we're going to return to McCarthyism. And, it's been 70 years now. We need to move on a little bit. So I did see Amelia had a question in the chat.
Yeah, I think Courtney was going to say something real quick, and then I was going to get to Amelia's.
Yes, this has relationship to the socialism question. So we have, a few years ago, I started thinking to myself, what should be public, right? What should public services entail? And then, so I made a small list myself that I could think of myself, and I put it towards our Facebook group, Washington Bernicrats Coalition. And through that, we came up with a pretty comprehensive list of things that we felt should be public, so basically socialized. So if you don't mind, can you give me a quick feedback on each one? Like yes, no, maybe combo, is that all right with you?
Public versus private, you mean?
Yeah. I couldn't see your face if you were nodding.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Sorry. Excuse me. So healthcare is a given. Yeah.
Well, okay. So one of the things that people often say that we want to make it socialized medicine, and I think that that's a misnomer. Medicare for all is not socialized medicine. So I will say that NHS is one of the highest ranked as far as their healthcare system, and that is socialized medicine. So the difference there is, like, Medicare for all still keeps hospitals and doctors private, and then the payment would be public. So I do definitely support Medicare for all, and I would support moving to an NHS-like system. The VA is public, it's socialized, but I just want to be careful that when we talk about Medicare for all, we're not saying it's socialized medicine, because it actually isn't. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. This is kind of a list is kind of socialized adjacent. It's more like public versus private. And so I was jumbling the language I was using. Postal service.
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure.
Schools.
Yeah.
Prisons.
Yeah.
Social security distribution and investment.
I would like to kind of get rid of prisons, but yes.
Okay, thank you for expanding on that. Foster care.
Yes, definitely. I believe that childcare should definitely be publicly funded. Basically, anything that any other developed country has figured out clearly needs to be publicly funded. We need to join the rest of the developed world. I mean, come on, they have such higher standards of living than we do. And the fact that we keep reinventing the wheel by oh, let's just privatize it more, because that's been working.
Yeah. So utilities, including water.
Mm-hmm.
How about internet and cell service?
Definitely. That's one thing, actually, with Amelia's question, that's how I was going to answer it, because we have families all over this district that are driving miles just to park in the middle school and the elementary school parking lots to log on to their internet, because they don't have internet at their homes. So, and due to COVID-19, it's kind of critical right now to have internet. Otherwise, you don't have access to the educational tools that our public schools are providing. So a lot of the times during our Zoom classroom for my daughter, we'd be talking to other students in her class who'd be sitting in the parking lot at the middle school because they don't have internet at home. So that's one thing that I definitely want to focus on is rural broadband and figuring out a way to make that public. Somebody brought up that there are rules to prevent that public expansion of broadband, but that would be one of my first priorities after healthcare is ensuring that
Excellent.
rural broadband and public broadband, and expand that to cities too, because it is, I think, something that is a necessity in these days and ages.
I want to point out Amelia's question that Georgia was referring to was, how are you going to help families? And she has since added more questions, and we will come back to that. We're about halfway through the list. We can just, most of them, I think we'll get through pretty quickly. So public lands and natural resources, banks, or at least
Yes, state bank, yes. I would definitely support a state bank.
Excellent. Mass transit, including airways, railways, ferries, buses. Infrastructure. Military and its associated industrial complex.
Yes, we definitely need to move away from the privatization of the military. I mean, I think that the experiment with Blackwater and those sort of military contractors really demonstrates how it is a very bad idea to privatize the military.
Excellent. The Veterans Administration then?
Yes, definitely.
Scientific funding.
Of course.
Space exploration / NASA, not Space Force.
Not Space Force. I do like NASA. I would prefer if the funding for that was used for other things. So I don't think that's my purview in the state legislature, but I would definitely keep it public. I would not privatize it, but I would like to see it reduced.
Okay. Libraries.
Ensuring that this planet is livable.
Right. Yeah, I get you. Home first. Libraries. Elections.
Yes, definitely.
Legal services, expanded even maybe. First responders.
Oh yeah.
Community housing, public housing. Maybe all housing. How do you feel about housing? Is it all housing or just expansion of housing?
I think that housing is a human right. Just like,
excellent.
I mean, well, yes.
So, and then we've been discussing something called the caregiver's basic income. It used to be what I considered a bridge to universal basic income, but then also UBI could be used against people in a way to reduce services by increasing pocket money a little bit. And so I had been backing away from it, but Yang came along, and the discussion of a basic income with a jobs guarantee combination, how are you on all of that? And then also COVID standards for UBI.
Yeah, I mean, again, COVID-19 just demonstrates that we need to make sure that we have better safety nets in place. And I support UBI. But I would be interested to hear what your reservations were for it, because I hadn't heard about that before. So
it's just that the right wing will possibly, some on the right will support UBI. Yeah, let's give them $1,000 a month, and then we won't give them food stamps. We won't get them, Apple Care, right? It's they can take that $1,000 and spend it however they want. They can choose to spend it on food or healthcare or housing.
Yeah, I definitely don't support that, because I feel that with food stamps and Apple Care, Medicaid, that helps the children a lot in the household, and we need to ensure that those children are getting nutrition and being able to see a doctor. So if it was a this or that, I would definitely not go with UBI over the food stamps and healthcare.
And then as our group worked through this discussion, we also started combining the UBI idea with the jobs guarantee, because then that kind of wedges in security and resources that might be ripped away by the right. So But I feel like progressives paint a picture of a guaranteed housing, guaranteed healthcare, guaranteed, like, and then a UBI on top of it,
Yes.
and a jobs guarantee. Like it's not ever just one thing for the progressive left. So
yeah, I definitely healthcare is my priority, and I feel like that would really help the working class a lot. It would be the biggest tax break and reversal of our regressive tax system that we could do immediately, and then work on some of those other things.
excellent. So we have a couple questions from Amelia, and then Oz seems to be back in case. And so if Oz, if you've got questions, be ready for them. Rhonda, do you want to walk through the Amelia questions?
No, go ahead. You're good.
Okay, well, I have to go off screen.
Then I can. Amelia asked, does your district have any issues with police misconduct?
Well, so I only have a little bit of Spokane County, the very northernmost part of Spokane County, but there has been some serious issues in Spokane City with police misconduct. And recently, turn of good news, this Spokane City Council rejected one of the funding bills for the Spokane Police Department based on like a lack of oversight. Because Spokane City is not in my district, I just kind of read about it peripherally, but I think that what they did in Spokane will influence a lot of other cities. And the fact that it's in kind of a rural, more conservative area made it even more newsworthy.
That's absolutely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Court.
So as I said, I don't know if it was during live, but I have family in your district who are religiously apolitical, and but one of my family members was driving down the road and saw a man about to jump off a bridge. So my family member stopped and was, had called the police and was successfully calming this person down and basically talking him down. And then the police arrived, agitated the situation, and then ended up shooting that man in front of my family member. So that's my familial testimonial on the local police.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the conversation that's come out of Black Lives Matter movement recently is very, very important. We need to really, and I've said this before in the interview, we really need to look at what other countries do as far as police reform and policing. A lot of other countries focus on rehabilitation and invest more in social work and that sort of thing, after school programs to prevent some of these things from happening. Healthcare, I think all of these things tie in to preventing these situations from happening in the first place. But I agree with you so completely. I before I call the cops, I mean, I don't call the cops, clearly, because things like that happen. I mean, I was visiting New Mexico because my family is all from Albuquerque, New Mexico, a few years ago. And there was somebody in the park where my daughter was playing with shooting up with needles and that sort of thing. And I briefly thought about calling the cops, but then I said, you know, what's going to happen is they're going to come shoot the guy. So, I mean, these are things that we have to think about. And a lot of people, when they hear defund the police, I see this argument online all the time. Well, what are you going to do when, you get raped? Well, I can tell you, if any of you have had this situation occur, most of the time, it's not a good experience to go to the police when you get raped. So I just feel like we need to refocus and fund social services before and defund the police. I'm totally about defunding the police.
Yes, thank you.
is refocusing to finding what's working in other countries and replicating that in our country.
Absolutely. And I like to say we need to tighten the weave on the social safety net. Like if you want to reduce crime, reduce desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And housing, healthcare, and food, that's where desperation lies.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. When people have nothing to lose, that's when they're more likely to commit crimes.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Oz was wanting to ask you a question. Oz, are you ready to do so?
Only if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Not very loud. I think you need to turn it up. Nope.
Turn it up.
Nope.
1 minute.
A little bit. Need to turn it up.
Okay, let's turn it up. Any better?
It's better,
Slightly.
but still more.
How about you say it and one of us will repeat it?
No, he's bringing out another gun.
All right, he's going to call in, I think.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we'll come back to Oz as soon as he jumps in. Is there another question in chat or in?
Nate, is there a question you'd like to ask while we're waiting for Oz to ring in? You're on mute if so. How about Franklin?
Amelia did touch on mental health.
I was about to say that too, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Saying mental health is important during this crisis as well, and we're compounding things and seeing what intersectionality means with the police brutality and COVID. Like I know that the police brutality issue has weighed heavy on myself as well. So
I agree, and SB 5222 does cover that. So
excellent.
Can you hear me now?
Pharmaceuticals. So.
Yes, I heard you. Can you speak up a little bit more?
Yep. And
Is
I
that
want to
better?
say Amelia
Oh.
says that Georgia will be wonderful.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you,
Sorry
Amelia.
about, so,
Yes,
sorry
we can
about the
hear
sound
you,
issue.
Oz. We got you
You can hear
now.
me? Okay, you got me now. Georgia, you're my expert, my guru, a lot of us, as far as healthcare, particularly in Washington State. Now, when you are in a debate or a forum with some of these other candidates out there, and I'm not trying to, put the other candidates on the spot without them being here, but when you hear things like, I believe passionately that healthcare is a right for every American, not a privileged few. When they start talking about, I believe we need to build on the Affordable Care Act to make sure everyone has the opportunity to buy into Medicare if they so choose. That's just one example. Now, how do you interpret, what are they saying? Are they really supporting Medicare, or are they supporting the medical insurance companies?
Yeah, so the problem with a public option is that it doesn't increase the risk pool to 100%. So the major cost savings with single payer healthcare is because you have reduced administrative costs, and that's due to having a 100% of your population in the same risk pool. So while a public option would be better than what we have now, it's definitely not going far enough. And my problem with politicians and elected officials who cop out, I feel like it's a cop out with a public option, is that clearly they've never negotiated or bargained for anything. Because when you go to a negotiation table, you don't start out with less than what you want. And the public option is a compromise, in my opinion. You always want to ask for more than what you want. When you're going to sell your truck and you want to sell it for $10,000, you don't ask for $8,000. You don't put it up for sale for $8,000. Put it up for sale for $12,000, then you negotiate down. So that's my huge issue with people who say, oh, we'll never get single payer, we'll never, get Medicare for all, is that, well, you're starting out negotiating yourself down from your ideal. Why do that? That's actually backwards of what you're supposed to do. So we should be asking for Medicare for all, we should be asking for UBI, we should be asking for publicly funded daycare and all that sort of thing. We need to ask for more than what we expect to get and negotiate down from there.
Then how do you respond to them when they say, oh, I absolutely embrace Medicare for all, but we need to build on it? So on one hand, they're being viewed as being a supporter of Medicare for all, which is what I would say 90% of the establishment, I'll call them establishment in tune candidates, are saying. They say they want Medicare for all, and therefore they're perceived as wanting Medicare for all, when it's actually the antithesis. They want to keep supporting the for-profit medical insurance framework because that's where their donors come in with some of the biggest donations and keep their campaign coffers full. Now, how do we go back and say to these individuals, you do not support Medicare for all. You're supporting an incremental approach to getting to some sort of a universal payer, single payer system that is going to be blocked by the big money interests that are now running your campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I had this conversation a few times with Dr. Kim Schreier when she would say at our LD meetings that she supports Medicare for all. And then I would say, well, are you going to co-sponsor? At that time, it was HR 676 was the Medicare for all bill. It's now has a new number. And then she would say, no, I have my own plan. And when I read her plan, it was a public option. So I was able to confront her about it the next meeting and tell her that public option doesn't go far enough. It doesn't increase the risk pool, yada, yada, yada. And also what I said before, when you go to the negotiation table asking for less than what you actually want, then you get less than that. So you're not going to end up with the public option. You're going to end up something with more privatization of the system, like what we ended up with the ACA, 1,000-page gift to the for-profit insurance companies. So we need to start out stronger. But the problem is you're competing with their donors. So you're competing with the for-profit insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. So we can argue until we're blue in the face. But if we're not giving them the max out of donations, I don't think we're going to change their mind. We need to either primary them or primary them, I guess. I mean, those are our options. So
no, I appreciate your response. I'm just looking at a knockout punch on this because their rhetoric is being switched up in this particular election cycle. The think tanks that work for them say, oh, okay, just say you support Medicare for all, but then tell them how we need to get there. And what we're seeing more and more, we're seeing some consulting groups, particularly in Washington State, which I believe is from their think tank, because they know how adamant and what a litmus test it is for many progressives on these candidates, voting only on whether you support Medicare for all or not. So they're trying to glean themselves into the thoughts of the public as, oh, they do support Medicare, when in fact, I would challenge that all day long. So thank you for your response. I'm sorry I've been so long-winded, but I'm really running into some difficulty with this particular question as far as these establishment candidates saying they support Medicare for all when they actually don't.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I like I said, I had to deal with that with Dr. Kim Schreier. So it's really disappointing when they co-opt terminology that we're using for an issue and then don't actually support the issue.
I don't remember the number of the bill. I think it's the Cascadia Care, where the one that Inslee was like, we passed a public option in Washington. It's like, no, you passed a study for it. And the study's already been done for 1/10 of the price that you allotted for it. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
Do you have another meeting at 2:30? Sorry.
I was about to say it's time to get going. I was just waiting for this one to go. I'd like to give you an opportunity to give a little spiel. Let people know where they can find you, how they can help, where they can donate. And I also want to say thank you for taking your time out with us today. Go ahead, Georgia.
Yeah, so if you go to Davenport for Washington, and that's FOR spelled out.com, you can volunteer for my campaign. We're sending out postcards. We're going to be doing text banking. You can donate. Donations really help out grassroots campaigns like mine, help pay for those postcards, pay for signage. We want to get some really big signs up by the highways here. Yeah, it's just go to my website and help me out.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I will have links in the description below in the YouTube so you guys can get to Georgia's page easily. Thank you all again, and it'll be just 1 second, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.